Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 25 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. This week we're talking with Derek Hunter, host of WBAL's Derek Hunter Show. He's a pundit who fuses politics with his pop culture musings, and few people do it better. But before our interview, I wanted to talk about the upcoming Wonder Woman movie and the cultural noise surrounding it. The movie doesn't hit theaters until next month, June 2nd, but there's already been a ton of chatter about it. Now, part of that is obvious. It's a superhero film. It's part of the DC movie universe, and some of the DC movies have been less than excellent. But also, it's about the first female-led superhero in quite some time. Frankly, since the original Iron Man really kind of booted up the whole superhero genre, there's really not been a singular female star who took center stage. Of course, we've had Black Widow and a few other kind of secondary characters, but this is the first time we're having a female superhero in this new age of superhero movies. So I get it. It makes sense, and I think there's a lot riding on the film from that perspective. But the conversation isn't just about invisible jets and golden lassos. Well, it's about inappropriate merchandising tie-ins like Think Thin, the protein bars. Some people are upset about that because it's fat-shaming to have Wonder Woman associated with such a product. Or the fact that in one scene in the trailer, Wonder Woman lifts up her arms and guess what you don't see? Hair. She's clean-shaven and some people are outraged by that. Then others are just aghast that there haven't been enough trailers for the movie. It should be marketed more heavily. It's not being given the whole Suicide Squad marketing treatment. What's going on? Is it sexism? Who? Also, what about that costume? Boy, it reveals a lot of skin, doesn't it? Isn't that sexist? Now, ironically, Gal Gadot, who plays Wonder Woman, said that, well, if you're a feminist, you should wear whatever you want to wear. And when she gave that answer, it kind of seemed like obvious, but also kind of reflected the fact that maybe she's not aware of what's going on in our culture these days. These are the arguments going on. This is the kind of blowback that's happening in almost every pop culture item. Superhero movies, comedies, talk shows, stand-up routines. Everything goes to the social justice warrior ringer. And frankly, I have to say, unless you're doing the most bland, inoffensive storyline or a comedy routine, TV or movie project, I don't know why you bother. And frankly, I would think that the creative artists out there today are aghast at what's going on. Just imagine you're sitting at your typewriter, going on your word processor, maybe even going on a legal pad and saying, hey, I'm going to write the next great American movie, TV show, what have you. What are you thinking about? Do you think about all the things that could go wrong? And not just the actors and the budgets and the getting funding for the projects and making sure the right people see it or at least see the pitch. I'm talking about all these conversations that crop up after the fact. I mean, when the Wonder Woman team decided to team up with that protein bar, did they really think they were going to offend people? I mean, couldn't they even imagine that? But you know what? If you're living in today's pop culture realm, you can't not imagine it, frankly. You've got to think about all the different connections that can be made and all the different ways that people may be upset by what's going on. It's real. It's out there. And, it's only a few weeks before the Wonder Woman movie comes out. And not only do I expect more of this, I think when the movie hits theaters, you could have a whole different conversation. Who knows? Is it woke enough? Is the main character empowering enough? There's a little kind of a nod to sexism in the trailers. And I think it's kind of done with a nice wink effect to it that I think is sort of appropriate given all the conversations around it. But it remains to be seen what will happen next. Now, it does harken back a little bit to the Ghostbusters film. Of course, that got caught up in all the pre-release nonsense about sexism, about hate, about the people who were aghast at the fact that they made it all women instead of all men. Lots of conversations around that movie. Frankly, few of them did the project justice or did it a favor, frankly, because obviously it underwhelmed at the box office. There's no talk of a sequel. They may reboot it at some point. I don't think they want to get rid of that property. The Ghostbusters brand still has some cachet, but that was a bit of a nightmare. I don't think that's happening here with Wonder Woman, but you know what? Anything is possible. We've got a few weeks left before the movie hits theaters, and nothing goes past the social justice wars. They want to pounce on everything, and it's never enough. And frankly, I wrote about that briefly at Hollywood in Toto this week about the movie Snatched with Amy Schumer. Here's a very woke, very liberal, very feminist star putting out a movie on Mother's Day weekend. What could be better? What could be cozier? What could be more empowering? But lots of critics said the movie's racist because it dares to show people of color in a negative light. It's two more white characters finding themselves and becoming empowered in a third world country setting. These are the conversations that go on. Instead of just saying, hey, it's a mother-daughter comedy with a couple of very popular actresses. Can't we just sit back and enjoy it? Well, we can't. And I really have to say, what's going on in the minds of today's artists? Do they worry about that? Does it make them change their stories? And does it make it just less fun to be a creator in 2017? Because frankly, I think it's a buzzkill, and I can't imagine they don't think the same.
From CBN Documentaries comes a new film, In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem, the extraordinary true story of the Six-Day War.
Our goal is clear: to wipe Israel off the map.
For 6 days in 1967, surrounded by enemies on all sides, Israel stood alone.
The time has come.
And changed history.
To begin a battle of annihilation.
In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem. In select movie theaters for a special one-night event Tuesday, May 23rd. For theaters and tickets, go to inourhands1967.com.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
You will believe a man can fly.
That's right. I'm getting too old for this.
Get to the chopper if you feel lucky, punks.
Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof.
Yo, Adrian.
Hey, we're covering all these franchises and more over here on iTunes at the Franchise Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Ehrenberg.
And I'm your host, Henry Papali, and check us out, folks.
What's your favorite scary movie? Probably being covered. All right. Take the red pill.
This week's hit tip of the week is Life in Pieces. The CBS comedy is currently wrapping up its second season, and I have to say, I've missed most of it so far, but a friend recently tipped me off, said, hey, if you're watching that show, it's pretty darn funny. And I trusted her taste, and I decided to give it a try. Now, I'm checking up on the show, Season 1, on Netflix, which, of course, is one of the best ways to catch up on old TV shows or recent shows that you just kind of missed the beginning of and want to kind of get back up to speed. And this is the kind of show you can jump in virtually any time, which is good. If there's any sort of narrative going on, I really haven't seen anything specific about it. I think you can sort of watch each show, enjoy it, and maybe get a sense of what the momentum is, but it's not exactly like typical shows these days where there are very specific stories going on. But I have to say, after a couple of episodes, I was already hooked, and I can't wait to watch some more. It's a great sort of tension breaker, especially for people who are overworked like I am. It's a story of a large middle-class family and kind of has echoes of Modern Family from that perspective. And each episode is captured in 4 distinct tales or pieces. Of course, the cast is really top-notch here. You got Diane Wiest, Colin Hanks, son of Tom, James Brolin, and a few others, just really talented performers who, right from that opening episode, nail their character, and also the camaraderie and chemistry between the different players is excellent right off the bat. Many shows, it takes a while before that kind of chemistry really starts to get going. I remember watching the original Sons of Anarchy Season 1, and while it was great from the get-go, didn't quite buy all the characters. I didn't think they were locked in immediately. After a while, that kicked in, and it was a really terrific show from Season 1 to Season 7. But this particular show, it just seems like right out of the gate, they understand what's going on, the jokes, the tone, the message, and the fact that this is truly a family. You get all of that right away, and that's one of the show's many strengths. Now, is it better than Modern Family? I don't think so, at least not yet. Maybe it'll get there in a couple more seasons. It's already been approved for a third season, which will kick off in the fall. But for right now, it's great escapist entertainment. We need more good comedies on TV. And often, while the best of the best is on HBO, on Netflix, on streaming services, this is CBS. So good for them putting on a show that's high quality, funny, and you can even mention it in the same breath as Modern Family, even if it's not quite there yet. But we'll see. Maybe it'll catch up. Modern Family is showing a little bit of its age, and right now, Life in Pieces just looks darn excellent.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Now let's get to our interview with Derek Hunter. Derek is the radio show host on Baltimore's WBAL 1090 AM, but he's also one of the feistiest conservatives on Twitter. Check him out at Derek A. Hunter. You can read his columns about politics and pop culture and the combination of the two at the Daily Caller and townhall.com. And frankly, having edited some of his work in the past, he might be the quickest writer on the conservative side of the aisle. He's that quick and that good, and it's amazing what he can dash off and really kind of beat the competition in so many ways. Getting a little behind-the-scenes glimpse of Derek in action kind of just made me appreciate him all the more. Here's my interview with Derek Hunter. I was reading a little bit about your background, and a research assistant working as the press secretary for Conrad Burns. At that time, as a younger man, and you're still a pretty young guy, did you have radio in the back of your mind as something you wanted to do, or did you kind of think you might end up in a different career path?
I never planned on getting into radio. Radio is something I loved. I've listened to talk radio since I was 12, but almost exclusively. But it was never anything that was on the plan. I wouldn't have known how to go about it. If I'd have tried, I probably would have screwed it up, to be perfectly honest with you.
Gotcha. What was your go-to show when you were younger?
It was always Rush and a guy out of Detroit where I grew up named David Newman.
Huh, okay. I was weaned on Soupy Sales and Howard Stern, which is kind of the yin and yang, I guess you could say. But,
yeah, there's a little bit of you got a wide berth there between the two. But Soupy Sales, I believe, was actually from Detroit, and Howard Stern did a stint in Detroit before my time, but he wasn't on in Detroit. He wasn't an option. So
gotcha. Now, obviously, you worked behind the scenes when the formation of the Daily Caller. And it's still going strong today. You're still a contributor. Talk a little bit about those early days, because I imagine a startup like that is sort of a unique beast. And what kind of jumps out at you when you think about those early days?
How crazy we were. I had met Tucker. God, it's going to really sound bad. It's going to be name dropping. You'll have to forgive me for that. But I met Tucker Carlson at a party at Christopher Hitchens' apartment. After the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I was friends with Christopher, and he invited me to the White House Correspondents' Dinner after party, the Vanity Fair one that he used to host. And I met Tucker there, and I'd been doing a podcast and a happy hour with a couple of friends of mine, and I'd emailed with him, trying to get him to come either to the happy hour as the guest or come on the show, and he wasn't able to do it. He was very nice responding to it, but I introduced myself. We talked for a bit. I emailed him again. He had agreed that night to come on the show finally, and we set it up. It was right after the 2008 election. And after recording it, we were at the Heritage Foundation where I used to record the show. We started talking, and he asked, what are you going to do? And I had an idea for a website. And he said, I had an idea for a website too with my friend Neil. And I sort of laid out what I had, and he said it was very similar to what he had. And I would not have been able to do it, but he certainly could and did. So I get a email from him about 2 weeks later asking me for breakfast, and I said, sure. So I showed up, and it was him and his partner and his longtime friend since school, Neil Patel, at a restaurant in Georgetown. I was living in Baltimore. I had to get up really early and trek in on the train. And I'm thinking, I'm just doing this so I can suck up to Tucker Carlson. This is kind of stupid. And after I left, it was like an hour and a half. We had a good time, and the Tucker and Neil both have a good sense of humor. I left. I walked out, and I thought, that seemed a lot like a job interview. That was weird. They didn't tell me anything. I just thought, wow, I made an impression on the guy who wanted to introduce me to his friend or whatever. And then a couple of weeks later, we had another breakfast, and then they offered me a job. They asked me to come on board. They hadn't hired anybody yet. We didn't have a name. We didn't have an office. We didn't have anything. So I said, sure. And then nothing came of it because there was nothing to do. There was nothing set up. I was working for Grover Norquist at the time, and then I sort of started doing things on the side for the Daily Caller, and eventually a couple months later, Tucker calls and says, all right, we're going to start hitting the ground. We'd like you to, call it a day over at ATR and come on board. And so I did, and there were 5 employees. We had an office in DuPont Circle. It was a 4th floor walk-up. It was, there still wasn't a website. There still wasn't a name, wasn't a design, but we started working on those things, trying to come up with something. It was, I would host Friday poker nights with Hill staff and think tankers. and there was a lot of drinking, a lot of smoking of cigarettes, and not a lot of work going on for a while. Then eventually we got our act together. We came up with the name. Here's a little bit of trivia for you, Christian.
Sure.
It was almost called the Northwest Corner.
Huh.
I managed to talk them out of it. Tucker and Neil live in Northwest D.C., and they wanted to name it the Northwest Corner. I managed to get them out of it. I had said, the corner at National Review. It's a little too regional as well. You don't want to do that. I had them on the line, and I bought the URL. We were all set to go with being called News Q. All of the different iterations, just News and Q, and then QUEUE, and all of that, or CUE. We had all of them just in case, it's in the queue or queued up or however you want to do it. We were set to go with that. And then it turns out that a gay group in Wisconsin, I believe, had the copyright on the name. So we owned for News Queer. So we owned the URLs and they owned the copyright. Now we could have kept it and gotten to probably a fight with them about it, or we just decided, all right, you guys had the copyright first, we're not going to do it. And we just sold them the URL. So they ended up with the Daily Caller.
Nice.
And we went from 5 employees to about 30 interns to now a very large staff. It's been exponential growth, and it's great to see.
I'm sure there's a lot of lessons along that way, but what's the important takeaway from that launch? I know it was sort of rough and tumble, and that's sort of the part of the fun of being an entrepreneur, but what do you think, looking at the media landscape today, what's the key lesson you think that the Daily Caller has done right so far?
They do it honestly. They do. I mean, there's no ambiguity that it's a conservative news site. They don't try and hide it. They don't try to pretend that they're NBC News, where we're straight down the middle. We're straight down the middle. The reporting is honest, but that the people who work there have a conservative mindset. Mm-hmm. So they look at stories differently. The mainstream media tries to pretend that they're the arbiters of fairness and justice, and that's just simply not the case. My takeaway would be honest with your audience. They can figure it out on their own, and I think that's much better than lying to your audience and trying to tell them that no, we don't have such petty biases, especially as you know, Christian. You follow some of these journalists on Twitter.
It's shocking.
Yeah. Oh, so you're an honest, unbiased reporter sitting here saying that the Nazis have just marched into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Yeah, that might color your coverage a little bit. I don't care that it colors your coverage a little bit. I care that you don't tell your audience that it colors your coverage a little bit.
Yeah, great point. You alluded to the happy hours, and you also talked about the early podcasts. I'm going to guess that the two of them worked maybe hand in hand, or there was sort of a little bit of synchronicity there. At that point, being a radio lover and a new podcaster, is that when sort of the thought of going into radio started to happen? I do want to get to that point, because obviously you're a successful host now. I'm kind of curious about that transition.
No, the podcast was recorded on Mondays and posted on Tuesdays, and the happy hour was on the first Friday of the month. When I worked at the Heritage Foundation and I did health policy, as you can see, there's no rhyme nor reason to my career. It's not a straight line. It's a game of hopscotch where the rain washed away half the chalk lines.
Serpentine.
I was at my desk one day, and Christine Brooks came by my office, and she was in charge of PR. And she goes, "Hey, Derek Hunter, radio star," and then walks away. And I'm thinking, what did she just sign me up for? Am I going to have to do some interview? Because I didn't have a phone at the time at home. Uh-huh. So I was like, if I had an evening radio interview, I had to stay at work and take the late train. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have anything. So I couldn't afford any of it. So I go into her office ready to talk my way out of whatever she'd signed me up for, and she told me that they'd gotten a show 1 hour a week on righttalk.com, if anybody remembers that. And they were looking for somebody who could talk for an hour without umming and awing and embarrassing the place. So they said my name came up because I have a bit of a motor mouth. So I and my friend Brian Phillips, who ended up doing rapid communications for Ted Cruz last year, were tapped to host this, and we loved it. But then I left to go to the Senate, and he eventually left to go to the Tax Foundation. So we stopped doing that. After my boss lost, we started this happy hour together, which became very successful. And we thought, well, we really like doing that radio thing or that internet thing. Why don't we do a podcast? Because we had access to the Heritage radio studio. After hours, nobody was there. They'd let us use it. So we did it, and it was just a blast again. It was a lot of fun, and eventually he left to work in the Senate, and I got more people in, but it was me and 2 other guys, and I never thought anything would come of it until I met my wife, who worked in radio. So I guess, you sleep your way to the top, you marry your way to the top. Her station in D.C. is a big station in D.C., the big talk station. It's the Rush station. And they had an opening on Saturday afternoons that they just kind of plug somebody in from 4 to 7. I managed to convince her boss to give me and my friend Brian Darling, who I was doing the show with at the time, a shot. Just say, hey, put together a demo and do that. But they wanted a woman on board as well. So called up a friend Mary Catherine Ham. She's since gone on to bigger and better things, but she agreed to do it. We came in. We were all terrified the first day, absolutely terrified. You're staring at 3 hours, Christian. You know how that is. It's like, holy cow, this is forever long. And I had 15 dead trees worth of paper in front of me of everything. So in case nothing happened, I had every story under the sun. I got through just a little bit of it, and boom, we were done. And it's like, that was a lot of fun. And it was so quick. It was a blast. We did that a few more times, like once a month or whatever. Mary Catherine eventually stopped doing it. We got Carrie Pickett in there. Then eventually I started doing it myself. That led to a nighttime opening at WBAL, where I am now, occasionally. Mm-hmm. And then that led to a full-time job there. It was, like I say, it was all kind of a fluke. It certainly wasn't planned. I would not know how to go about contacting somebody to get on to a radio station. If I tried, I would have screwed it up.
Gotcha. Obviously, you talk politics and you talk about it from the right of center perspective, but you also talk pop culture, and you do it. I don't think every talk show host, either national or local, gets pop culture like you do. Even Rush Limbaugh, who I've listened to for years as well, occasionally he'll kind of stumble and bumble when he'll not get a reference or just doesn't sort of connect the pieces there. Talk about the pop culture part of your show, and do you find it expanding in recent months? I mean, just my sense is that pop culture is more important today than it was 5 years ago. Are you finding your show evolving in that direction?
It's not evolving. It just, I don't ever set out to, as you know, Andrew Breitbart, he said famously, and I quote it all the time, and everybody who knew him quotes it all the time, that politics is downstream from culture. And the pop culture determines it. We're all impacted. A part of us is John Hughes movies. They were just such a huge part of our growing up that if you talk about Bender, you got that glove, that hand up at the end of the movie, Breakfast Club. You know that. So I don't make it deliberate. Mm-hmm. It just, when it occurs to me, it comes out, and that resonates with people. I found that, look, anybody can tell you the news of the day. Anybody can it's all out there. It's not like talk radio hosts or AP reporters doing stakeouts outside of members' offices on Capitol Hill. But it's the ability to convey the news of the day in an interesting and entertaining way. I guarantee you, Christian, that you remember jokes you heard in junior high.
Yeah.
They're dumb now, but you probably tell them to your kids and they'll think they're funny, but you remember them because they made you laugh. They made an impression on you. If you can convey important information with a laugh, with an association of something that you care about, something that you know by heart, I find it to be a much more effective way of getting through to people. If anybody can just recite statistics, you don't remember them when you're done. You just ballpark and whatever. But if you crack a joke in there and make them smile, they'll remember that a lot better than they will if you just do a dry reading. Like I said, when I first started doing this. Rush Limbaugh isn't successful because he gives you information you can't get anywhere else. He's successful because he gives you information you can get anywhere else in an entertaining way. And that's what I try to do. It just kind of comes out. It occurs to me as I'm speaking. So if you try to plan something, it sounds like you tried to plan it, and you end up kind of trying to steer a conversation and manipulate to think of a certain line you said in your head earlier, and you're like, oh, I've got to say that. And then you try and get there, and it gets really clunky and awkward just so you can get to this payoff that you completely undercut because you didn't set it up right. It's much better, I find, to be organic. But that said, as you know, your life is pop culture. You love it. I watch more movies than a human being probably should, TV shows more than a human being probably should, and I just happen to have a very good visual memory. When I see something, I tend to remember it forever, or at least a very long time, and can recall it, so that helps. But it's do it if you can is what my advice would be, but don't ever make a point of doing it because it just won't work.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk a little bit about Hollywood. It's no breaking news that Hollywood leans left, and they've been active and vocal for a while. But, this past year, it seems to have gotten more pronounced and, frankly, uglier in a way that I haven't seen before. And I wonder just sort of to myself, and I want to get your impression of it, will Hollywood pay a collective price for that kind of activism? And, you look at The Last Jedi coming up and some of the other films, and the box office seems robust, and people genuinely love their Netflix. So on one hand, we keep gobbling up the content, but I also sense a genuine anger, at least on the right, toward Hollywood celebrities that, I'm not going to support that actor. Is that bluster? I mean, does there come a point where all this activism and all this anger and all this sort of speaking out and insulting the audience where it does sort of have a pragmatic fallout from it?
I don't know. The left is very hive-minded when it comes to boycotts. They're ready. They're sitting at the ready going, tell me what to hate, and just hit go, and they'll go. Conservatives get worked up, they get angry, and then they get over it. And that's to our great credit, I think, in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. But it's also to the detriment because it doesn't bring about change if you just quickly move on. Or you stand up and say, I demand change. Now I'm going to make a sandwich. That's not really particularly effective when it comes to trying to institute change. Like Joss Whedon, absolute lunatic. He's rabid lefty, nasty human being. It's more than that. I don't care about his politics. My best friend is someone I like to call a capitalist communist. He's a very lefty guy, just doesn't live that way. But in his politics, he's very left. But I'll go see the next Avengers movie. I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to say I will not go see the next Joss Whedon movie, but I will. I know I will.
Yeah.
Because I want to see it. The problem is that, and you know this in the business that you're in all the movies that you've seen and reviewed, conservatives are god-awful storytellers. And it's because they make terrible movies because they're more interested in the message than the movie. One of the things that drives me nuts is whenever I hear or see anybody who talks about how we're a conservative band or I'm a conservative comedian, like, how about you just rock? How about you just be funny? Why not focus on the job part rather than the politics part? The politics can take care of itself. And weirdly, some of the most conservative movies have been made accidentally by rabid lefties, like Knocked Up, very pro-life movie.
Yeah,
Juno, very pro-life movie. Rabidly pro-choice directors who just accidentally made a movie with a message that is pro-life. And they certainly didn't do it, and they're probably mad that they did it, but they didn't mean to do it. But as far as like conservative movies, it is, I want to convey this message. And then what movie can we make that will convey this message? It's like, no, come up with a good movie. Don't worry about the message, or be subtle about it. Make it not the main point. You watch those Atlas Shrugged 3 movies.
It's pretty brutal.
They were terrible. They were terrible. It was like being beaten on the head with a dead salmon. They just kept having these ridiculous monologues where they're explaining everything in minute detail. And like, if a real human being said that to somebody about a minute into it, they'd go, dude, I got it. Shut up. Okay? I get it. That's not, nobody's on set telling them that because they look at Hollywood as a foreign land, and there's lessons to be learned. Lefties in Hollywood know how to make a great movie. They know how to make a great documentary. You watch even conservative documentaries. Yes, I have Netflix. I love documentaries. I look at documentaries all the time. And there aren't many conservative documentaries up there. The ones that are really bad because they beat you over the head with their message. There's no creativity. The B-roll is spot on for whatever the narrator happens to be saying. There's just no creativity because they're so focused on the message they forget to entertain.
Yeah.
The conservative band Madison Rising, they're a conservative band, and they just forgot to make good music. Aside from that, they were great. And that's the problem. Focus on what you do. Focus on the end product being good rather than being your message. And then eventually you'll figure it out. But until conservatives get good at providing a product in the genre that they're in, then they're never going to get to the point that they're able to convey a message. And the audiences are not going to boycott big blockbuster movies. Hollywood is full of liberals. I went and saw Fast and Furious 8 last week and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 last week. Loved them both for different reasons. They're both insane and implausible. But I don't go to the movies to get a message. I don't go to the movies to support my politics. I go to the movies to have 2 hours where I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of money doing that. And my side could learn a thing or two from that concept.
Gotcha. I want to switch gears real quickly. You've been pretty critical of Trump over the last year or so, and I think you've been very consistent about it. And I've watched other radio show hosts really contort themselves, either pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-Trump today, anti-Trump tomorrow. It's been pretty fascinating to watch, and I think you're one of the few people who's been consistent and sort of let the chips fall where they may. What's that been like as someone who, I mean, you care about your audience, you need to deliver a crowd and ratings for your show, and yet I get the sense a lot of radio show hosts took some heat if they weren't completely on the Trump train. Talk a little bit about that, and was it hard to kind of maneuver around that? Because it doesn't sound easy, frankly.
At the beginning, it was kind of difficult to maneuver around that because I was in favor of Marco Rubio and then Ted Cruz. So I was, anti-John Kasich. He wasn't an issue. I was opposed to everybody else in the field to one degree or another. It was just that Trump was sucking up all the oxygen. And when Trump did something right, I praised him for it. I thought the way that he handled the media was perfect in the campaign. And I wished that other people had done the same, or at least adopted the same attitude towards, I'm not going to answer a garbage question. In fact, I'm going to call it a garbage question and sort of turn it back on the media. That didn't happen. Donald Trump won the nomination. I didn't think in a million years he would win, but I wanted to oppose Hillary Clinton. I still criticize Donald Trump when he does something wrong or asinine, but when he does something right, it is pretty easy to defend because it's all, right and wrong based on my personal opinions. And I back it up with facts and whatnot. So the audience, for a while, I was getting the grief of you're being too anti-Trump, and I just responded, I'm being honest. Tell me how I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And they couldn't. They've stuck with me, thankfully, and now it is. Look, I don't like most of the stuff that the guy's doing, but the big stuff that he's done so far, and the biggest, which is Neil Gorsuch, I support. So it hasn't been that difficult. Congress hasn't allowed him to do much, so there's not a lot to assess one way or the other as good or bad. But it's easy to criticize Democrats, and when Donald Trump needs to be criticized, it's easy to criticize him. You just have to remember to do it. You're doing it. It's kind of like telling a parent that their child is obnoxious. You've got to do it at a certain point. If they're in your house and he's knocking over everything and smashing your glasses, you're not just going to sit there and pretend, oh, Billy's an angel. You've got to eventually find a way that these people you want to keep in your life to tell them that their kid probably needs a swift spanking or a timeout or whatever, something. You need to get control of your kid. And I look at it that way. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't downplay it. But I don't try and nitpick. Like, if I wanted to go in and just do a show about the latest dumb thing Donald Trump said, anybody could. Just like you go in and do the latest thing some Democrat said that was dumb. It's picking your battles and making sure you have your points to back you up, and not doing it in a negative way where the mom and dad will throw their kid over their shoulder and storm out of your house and never look back. It's not really a delicate balance once you accept that that's the world. You're not going to convert anybody who hates him to love him, and you're not going to convert anybody who loves him to hate him. You just try to inform them and slowly chip away at the edges.
Gotcha. You just mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Let's look ahead real briefly to the summer season. What's the one movie you can't wait to see, and why?
I want to see Thor, but that's not until fall.
Yep.
I'm a real huge fan. I'm a huge fan of the the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I absolutely love that. There hasn't been a movie that's really disappointed me in that genre. And that DC Comics, on the other hand, don't get me started. They're terrible movies because they have no sense of humor in them. I don't even know what I'm looking up. What are the big blockbusters that are coming up this summer? Because Star Wars isn't until Christmas. I wouldn't admit to it, but I would probably go see Baywatch just because it looks funny. I'm not a fan of the Pirates. But it kind of looks like it'd be funny. Plus, The Rock is funny.
Yeah.
There's really not a whole lot that I'm looking at that I'm super excited about. It's mostly fall movies. It seems to, maybe I'm getting too old, Christian. Maybe they're just not appealing to me. But I like superhero movies, which kind of goes against my "I'm too old" thing. But I'm too old, but very immature. How's that?
That's a perfect balance.
Yeah, I mostly look forward to superhero movies because the big movies are coming out, are already out that I wanted to see. The ridiculous Fast and Furious 8, which nobody wants to explain why Vin Diesel can't bleed. I'm not really sure how that works.
Nor get a scratch.
Jump out of a moving car in Cuba that the car goes 40 feet in the air and explodes, and he rolls on the ground and just gets up and starts high-fiving people, and that's cool. But, no, the last movie I saw before that was, have you seen Trainspotting 2?
I have. And
what did you think of it?
I thought it was perfectly acceptable, but it didn't. You watch it and go, why did they make this? What was the impetus? I didn't kind of get it. And there's nothing incompetent about the movie. What was your take?
I loved the first one, and I was in Dublin, Ireland in the beginning of February, and it was out there 2 months before it was out here. And the wife was tired and not feeling all that well. She was 5 months pregnant, so she took a nap in the hotel, and I walked down to the theater and went and saw it, and I loved it. It didn't have a point, but I liked those characters, as degenerate as they were. I was amused by them, so I liked checking in on them. Nice to pop back in. It was kind of like a high school reunion. I'm here for 2 hours. Okay, it's good to see everybody still alive. All right. I'll see you in 20 years. That's right. Like I don't need to keep up with you. We don't. Facebook works. Don't call me. I'll look you up online. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny, and maybe it was part of seeing it in an Irish theater. But I enjoyed it quite a bit.
And I did read that they wanted to get together for the 10-year anniversary, and they all assembled, or they partially assembled, or the script was written. They just didn't have it. There wasn't enough time had passed. So I think the 20-year mark was pretty smart. So that was a good call there. Before we let you go, Derek, just real quickly, we always ask our guests at the Hollywood in Total podcast, what are you watching these days? What are you listening to? What's on your books, your nightstand book-wise? So anything jump out? I know you mentioned a couple of films you've seen recently, but maybe something a little more obscure or a little bit less obvious, or are you so focused on superheroes you can think of nothing else?
Well, I just finished watching Feud, Betty and Joan on FX on the DVR. Have you seen that?
I have not, no.
Have you watched Feud yet?
No, I haven't.
You should.
Okay.
And everybody should. It is Jessica Lange and Susan Sarandon give amazing performances and make two awful people sympathetic and infuriating simultaneously. Two spoiled people, as Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, incredibly spoiled, privileged, entitled people, and you hate them, and then you feel sorry for them, and you can do that both simultaneously. Two stunning performances. If you watched The People versus O.J. Simpson, it is every bit as good as that was, if not better. So I highly recommend that to everybody. It's only 8 episodes.
That's a sign of a great actor when you can play a really unappealing person and yet you still connect with them on some level. That's not easy. That's what Gene Hackman can do with some of his roles. So I'm glad to hear that about Feud.
And you know it's Jessica Lange, and you know it's Susan Sarandon, and then you forget that it's Jessica Lange and Susan Sarandon. It is surprising. The language can be coarse, and surprisingly, there's a lot of F-bombs for basic cable. But it is so brilliantly acted and directed and written that you cannot go wrong with that. As far as reading, I'm in the process of writing something now that's fairly long, so I haven't been doing a whole lot of reading lately. And music, I geek out on you. I don't really listen to music. If I do, it's the Replacements or the Beatles. I mostly listen to the Adam Carolla show.
Oh, me too. So excellent. Well, that's a great couple of tips.
That's it.
That's more than enough. Well, Derek, thank you again so much for checking in with us. And just kind of behind the scenes, Derek's been really supportive of my website, and I really appreciate that, Derek. And we will check in with you soon, and we will have all the information on where you can find Derek's articles and, of course, his radio show and WBAL on the show notes page as well. So thanks, Derek. Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.